Welcome to Rise from Switzerland, where the infection rate is now about 100 persons per day, where 25% of new cases are attributed to people arriving from the outside of the country, including Swiss that were away and have come back, and where my oldest daughter is watching Rise for the very first time. I am Professor Demian Hodari of EHL Lausanne.
And from lovely summertime London, my name is Anita Mendiratta, and we're thrilled to have you back with us for Rise, our weekly conversation to understand what in the world is going on in these increasingly changing times. I always say it every week, but this week is extra special. The reason being, it is our lucky number 13 episode, and we have a full house, a genuinely full house of special guests. Demian, why don't you do the honors?
Yeah, well, since the beginning, we've been saying that Rise is really a show not just for the audience, but with the audience. Hence the multiple polls that we do, the Q&A sessions, both with Anita, myself, and with our executives and residents, and the extended inbox. And today we really wanted to take that idea of the audience involvement to a new level. Since the very beginning, we've been talking about this episode, where we're going to bring on 5 of our regular viewers so that we can talk with them what it's like to be a student, a future student, someone who's employed, unemployed, and entrepreneurial, and try to understand how they've made sense of the last 100 days and how they're preparing for the next 100 days. But before we bring them on, and as always, I'd like to begin with a question for you, our audience. And today's question is a little bit longer with a lot of choices, so we're going to give you some extra time, but please do share with us your experiences and your views. Over to you. Well, in the first place, people have been continuing to work, which is, very positive in my mind that most people don't seem to have been struggling to be employed or have lost their job. So happy to see that. We've got in second place taking some classes, online classes, and I understand that might be some students who have still been enrolled, but also people with some free time that have been trying to continue their education. Building up the professional network, very important, especially for those of us out there every day trying to improve our careers. Anything else you noticed there, Anita?
I must say that's really interesting in not only the diversity of what people are doing, but firstly the honesty, which I'm really grateful for, because I think at the beginning of this lockdown we needed a way in and a way out, because I know that many people have really exercised their cooking skills. I've exercised my eating skills and not exercised enough, but I must say it's interesting to see how people are keeping busy. So thank you as always for sharing what you're up to.
And I'm guessing my daughter is probably one of the ones who answered binge watching TV.
Shame.
So we want to remind everybody that we love to answer your questions throughout the show. So you've got that nifty Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Make sure to use that and start to get questions in, both for us as well as for our panel that'll be on a little bit later.
Stunning. Excellent. So, Demian, I know you're in Switzerland, I'm in London, but where in the world are we in terms of what's going on in terms of our changing world? So, as always, I wanted to go through this past week. Interestingly, we have 7 world leaders to date that have tested positive for COVID-19. I raise this and we raise this only because it keeps the fact that this is real. People might not be talking about it as much, but it's still out there and it's affecting people. And it brings it close to home as well. Because as we all remember, in episode number 6, we had the lovely, lovely First Lady Tracy Winde, the wife of the Honorable Premier Winde in the Western Cape in South Africa, who I must say, when I got the news last week, I teared up in that he tested positive. And he, being diabetic, is increasingly sensitive to it. And it just brought it back to, we might be used to hearing the news, but when the news hits home and hits hard, it's still very scary. Reason being, we know we're still in wave 1 in a number of countries. Wave 2 and 3 are being spoken about in other parts of the world. And we're seeing spikes and surges. So this COVID-19 pandemic is defining 2020 in so many ways, economically and as well as we know from a medical perspective, which is why international governments are rolling out the aid packages, and they're doing so with a prioritization on green investments. So whether it's businesses, home loans, whatever that might be, people who are bringing in sustainable ideas, sustainable solutions, and ultimately re-engineering for a more solid and sustainable future, are getting prioritization. Travel, tourism, and hospitality package was released last week in the UK. Incredible move from the government in dropping VAT from 20% on tourism and hospitality to 5%. But that's not all. In addition, people being encouraged to dine out is very strongly supported by up to £10 per diner during the month of August. Why? To get people's comfort zones widened in going out again and venturing out in a way that helps local community supply chains. Very, very importantly, Global Graduation Week has continued around the world, but this past week was special because one of our gorgeous Wizards of Oz had 2 little graduates in her home. So from all of us at Rise, a very, very warm congratulations. We now move to the next slide. And that ultimately is looking at, so how are people spending? And I thought this was really interesting. And if you look at, of the 17,000 people that were interviewed and sampled in this questionnaire in May, ultimately, the delay of purchasing of flights, 1 in 3. Half the people interviewed are delaying any vacations and trips. But equally as interesting, insurance. 7% are delaying it. That has become the priority purchase as people are simply not feeling confident. Even if they want to go out, they're not confident about being able to go out confidently, shall we say. Demian, what's going on in your world?
Well, in fact, there's so much going on. And I'm going to try to go through a little bit of this quickly because I couldn't find anything here to leave out. New Zealand's interesting. They're restricting entry even for their nationals in order to contain virus. So even if you're from New Zealand, tough to go back home. Australia, same thing. They've slashed the number of nationals they're allowing back each week by 50%. And they're now charging you when you return to Australia for that 2-week quarantining within a hotel. You now have to pay for that. The country is no longer paying for that. And Melbourne and Victoria has locked down and is not able, people are not able to travel across regions in Australia like before. Hong Kong, they've suspended all schools due to another spike in the virus, which is obviously a negative impact on the economy as parents need to stay home more with their kids. In the USA, things just go from bad to worse. We've got a rise in COVID cases in 37 states this week. You can see I crossed out 33. That was a number on Friday when I originally made this slide. So things just get worse by the day. As examples, Arizona, Florida, and Texas, they're facing complete shutdowns with overwhelmed hospitals again. More than 24 states have paused or rolled back reopening plans, and obviously that always includes restaurants, bars, hotels, and so on, which is a negative for our industry. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, they've recorded a record high number of cases since the pandemic began, and that's exactly 14 days after the Trump rally. So many people are blaming that large amount of people in an indoor space for the spike there. We're starting to see some discussion about what's going to happen when a vaccine is eventually developed and produced. And here the question is, who's going to get the vaccine first? Not only which country, but who within each country? Will it be the elderly? Will it be children? Will it be people, frontline workers? Might it be minorities that have been more negatively impacted by the virus than others? A lot of questions that we're surely going to be up for discussion going forward. Big issue in the States right now, the idea of reopening schools. There are those who say we need to reopen these not only for the economy, but for the mental health of the students, and others saying the virus is just raging in too high of numbers to be able to protect anybody. And children do fall ill, maybe at lower numbers, but it's still not a safe place for them. So big issues there. And another one, maybe closer to home for some of our audience, big battle between the Trump administration and universities across America. Trump administration saying foreign students attending schools that are purely online have no need to be in the US, and so their student visas will be canceled and they won't be able to come to America to study. And there's a lot of discussion here about whether or not that's fair, whether or not that's the correct thing to do, but also what universities will do. And if you look at the next slide, there's been a regular survey going on. This one's about 2,000 universities that are asked each week, what are their plans for the fall semester, which will begin in September. And you can see 58% of universities surveyed are planning to have regular in-person classes. That number has been coming down steadily over the last couple of weeks, and I do expect that number to drop even more so going forward. You can see 27% there in purple proposing a hybrid model, meaning sometimes you'll be in class, sometimes you'll be online. Big important for a lot of the universities is that they want those students coming back to university town, living there. Some students, they can't house them all because of social distancing. many, many issues to decide about this, as university life is not just about classes, but also about socialization and extracurricular activities. So it'll be really interesting to see this going forward. That's what I got, Anita.
It's amazing to think, Demian, if at the beginning of our RISE journey 13 weeks ago, how all of the metrics have changed and how we are in as uncertain times, if not more, than at the beginning of this jersey. I keep doing that. This jersey keeps appearing, the journey. So what's going on in our industry and why does all of this matter to us? And this is what's really interesting, that no matter how destinations are opening up, ultimately, it comes down to 9 times out of 10, aviation. Admittedly, Switzerland is a bit different, but if I want to get out of London somewhere else in the world, I have to fly or take a very slow ferry. IATA did some research and they've been doing an ongoing tracking study. And in June, the results came back as follows. What was very concerning was this result, and it's a bit of a riddle when you ask the question. Expectations of travel being less once the pandemic subsides. So ultimately, what does it say? 66% of business people expect to travel less once the virus subsides. Same amount for leisure. What's very concerning on this when I look at it though, is the 25% and the 23% respectively, because they clearly are very likely to not travel, which is high degree of certainty. So even if people can travel, they don't necessarily want to, and they certainly aren't planning on it. One of the reasons for this is it links to the next chart. This was fascinating. In the same study, they looked at once the virus subsides, how likely are you to continue to adopt the protocols? And this was very alarming from the point of view of no more than 43% were actually prepared to go through what is now a mandatory check, whether it's thermometers, putting on face masks, having all of those tests done at the airport. People simply don't like the protocols, and their willingness to comply with them and adopt them after the virus has gone down in their locations is quite low. Even more concerning, 17% were unwilling to go ahead with the 14-day self-isolation, which ultimately means destinations which require self-isolation or the quarantine are going to lose travelers, because travelers simply don't want to go there, or they don't want to come back to their country and be grounded for another 14 days, having taken a few days off on holiday. All of this is very symptomatic and reflective of how much are people actually prepared to take seriously the invisibility of a crisis that we know is continuing for many more months to go. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, along those lines in terms of safety, here I've got some statistics on executives in the hospitality industry, primarily hotels, but beyond that, looking at workforce health and safety. And they've asked them what measures should be prioritized to ensure their health and safety. And this is from Deloitte. And you can see there those red boxed and green numbers: reconfiguring public areas and furniture to facilitate social distancing, automation to contactless procedures, and the third one was increased training and education. And I think there's two main things here. One is these are not cheap options, right? Reducing the vibrancy of the social space in the lobby, reducing the consumption that's going to take place there, automation, a lot more training, and we're going to see these costs eventually having to be passed on to consumers. The problem is we're incurring these costs as we reopen. We don't have the occupancy to really cover those costs, and we can't raise rates as people are already hesitant enough to travel. Tough times in the hotel industry. And the second thing, looking at that social distancing and automation, the issue there would be, are we reducing the customer experience? Is it becoming more sterile? We go into this slide here, we start to see something that I mentioned about 6 weeks ago when we looked at the rate of hotel delinquency on CMBS. And these are basically packaged loans that have been consolidated and owned by investors. And we had a big spike, you can see, from under 5% to nearly 20% back in May. The June figures risen up to almost 25%. It's higher than any other sector of any industry in the world right now, the average being around 10%. So again, another example of hotels being hit hard, being hit not only for consumers and employees, but also owners of hotels and those who own the debt on those hotels. So this impact of this pandemic is far reaching throughout the industry. And we can just see here, this is going to be a long battle. So don't think this is going to be over just when a vaccine is found and people start traveling. The repercussions are extensive. And I've got...
Go ahead.
That's it.
I find so interesting about this, Demian, is that we've gone through 13 weeks of rise. There's about 150 days people have been in lockdown. But what's scary is that it's invisible. We can't see it. We have no idea the threat. And yet people are distinctly getting fed up and frustrated with it. Yeah. And that's what's giving a very false sense of courage to go back into the world and assume that we are going back at all. It's about the next normal, and we're still trying to figure that out. Yeah. Which brings us to, sorry.
I just wanted to jump in on this one more thing. Chip Rogers from the American Hotel and Lodging Association is forecasting that 8,000 hotels may not close permanently come September once the summer season is over. And it's just saying that we don't really understand the repercussions of everything that's happening. And this number here of delinquency is just going to rise as less people travel, as the virus rages in the US, as hotels have to close. And I just wanted people to be aware, to be keeping an eye on this going forward, saying, even if things start to look a little bit better, being the grouch, don't count on it.
It's the why bother factor. Absolutely. Stunning. So, grouch. The challenge is on. Questions from the past that we're going to give each other 30 seconds to answer. Sir, go.
All right, the question for you. Daniel wants to know, how should domestic tourism be reintroduced to locals who are already familiar with the destination?
It's a great question, and it's a point that came up last week with Niall, and very much looking at it from the point of view of what can we actually do to get people to travel domestically. Firstly, put out the invitation. Secondly, encourage them to find new places that they didn't know were next door. Third, price incentivization is absolutely critical. And fourth, vital, it's increasing the sex appeal of traveling at home. How do you do that? By showing the rest of the world what the destination has to offer, even when they can't travel anywhere, and building up that demand. Really, really important. How's that?
Almost a minute, but good answer. Good answer.
Excellent. Sir, over to you. This is an interesting one. Some have said that Europe will suffer economically because of the lack of tourists from the US and China sides of source markets, countries that were not on the list of accepted arrivals because of their current situation with the virus, while others are confident that European tourism will be strong enough to support European tourism. What do you think, sir?
Yeah, we actually talked about this about a month ago with Arne Sorensen, CEO of Marriott, and Sebastian Bazan, CEO of Accor, disagreeing about who was going to recover first. US with a lot of domestic tourism, but we know now the virus is raging there, so tourism is probably not going to take off like expected. In Europe, the problem here was we need more international travel, more regional travel, more cross-border travel rather than just purely domestic, but the virus seems to be better contained here. So it's a question about what's going to be necessary to prosper. But regardless, in Europe, no Chinese, no US travelers, it's going to be rough. So things are going to improve, but it's going to be a tough summer.
I must say, sir, you're getting pretty good at this challenge. Great answer, great timing.
Thank you. Been practicing. So what else is going on? Every week we'd like to look at some of the headlines in the news, and I've got a couple this week that I think are going to be a little bit surprising for some people. First one, Disney World reopens as coronavirus infections soar in Florida. We've brought up Disney a couple of times. We were so excited when they reopened in Shanghai. We've talked about some of the things they were doing for their workers that were planning to do. And I'm bringing this up here because there are 15,000 new cases were detected yesterday in Florida. That's a record for any state at all in the US. Even New York, at the height of the pandemic, or what we thought was the height of the pandemic back in April, only had about 12,000 as its high point in any one day. So as bad as things are in Florida, Disney still opens. So on the positive side, some encouragement, maybe some break for some people and get some economy going, but it's a dangerous thing. And if you look at my second slide, this is not actually a headline, but this is a petition, online petition that's gained 20,000 signatures, and it was started by concerned cast members of Walt Disney World in Florida. Basically, they said, protect our magic makers, meaning them, the employees. Don't open theme park until it's safe. So there is a lot of concern. I mean, people are happy to go back to work in a lot of cases, need to go back to work in a lot of cases, but there is concern about ensuring the safety of workforce across different kinds of organizations. As we know, hotels and restaurants is a big one. And here at Disney, where you've got thousands of people coming from all around the world, or at least now from around the US, it's a concern for a lot of people. And so it's again, this question of how do we find the balance between the economy or livelihoods, as we've said, and lives and the health and safety. And so I just wanted to bring that up and have people keep an eye a little bit on how Walt Disney World ensure safety through a lot of positive measures. The one big one being it's outdoors for most attractions, which we know is a way to not transmit the disease as much. And my third headline is about hostels. We've talked a lot about hotels and restaurants, and I just wanted to mention these youth hostels because so much of our audience skews towards younger people who appreciate these things. But as we know, hostels are really about community and about sharing, or in other words, partying. And so how does a hostel, which is all about this kind of vibrant lifestyle, compete going forward? They got to have less people within the hostels, spread out more, no big partying, can't really have dancing. One of them actually has a dance floor marked where you are allowed to dance to ensure that you keep a distance from people. So there are some creative ways that they're looking to do this, but this is a sector of the industry that isn't really getting a lot of attention right now. And it's been one of the better performing sectors in the hotel industry over the last 5 or 6 years. So again, interesting to see how hostel industry and individual units and properties deal with this virus going forward.
It's so interesting you brought these up, and particularly if you think, and we've talked about this before, people are frustrated, people have missed each other, the huggability factor, combine that with sunshine, summer, and alcohol, and suddenly social distancing falls right off the line and everyone becomes goofy. That's the dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to share with you mine. So mine are much more personal. Reason being, firstly, we had Richard Quest on with us last week. And the week before, how I ended up getting that video was because I was watching him on television and I thought, Richard, you don't look well. And I sent him a WhatsApp, and it turns out, reason being, he's still seeing some of the symptoms of the virus impact him. And it's heartbreaking because this is not a flu. It's within the coronavirus family, but it's very different than a seasonal flu. And it's not a matter of let's just get it and get over it, especially when you talk to Demian about those COVID parties that were taking place. What Richard found is that the hacking cough is continuing, and even more frightening than that, in terms of that, if that's not scary enough from a respiratory point of view, he was finding himself, as he said, clumsy, which is very concerning in terms of he sees the curb, he trips over the curb, this doesn't make sense. To see someone as strong and wise and beautiful as him clearly is unnerved by this, that says that we're into a long journey of just understanding what in the world is going on with this virus so we can adjust to it. Because once you've gotten through COVID-19, clearly the symptoms remain in terms of the hidden symptoms that are going to emerge, which is why I brought in the next headline. And that being that it was very interesting that Carnival Cruises reached out to the WTTC to speak to them about actually stepping up. How do we adjust to the protocols? And how do we understand with scientific evidence, evidence-based practices on how we actually adjust going into the future? So the cruise industry has been a champion of ultimately partnering with the medical fraternity, whether they're epidemiologists, general healthcare practitioners, whatever they might be, to understand how do we figure this out? Because we need to crack this. Our industry is vital. Our world moving is vital. So there's a scientific summit taking place on July 23rd. Anyone wanting to know, please send us an email at riseweekly2020@gmail.com. We'll send you some of the information. But I thought this was really interesting that the cruise industry, which we know was suffering badly around healthcare concerns, have stepped up to say, why don't we champion figuring this out so the whole travel and tourism industry can come back healthy again? I thought that was fantastic.
How is this different? How is that different from what the hotel industry has been doing in terms of bringing in big names in health and safety to come up with the new policies for hotels?
Because policies is one thing, but having the public actually engage with the practitioners, particularly, and I'm glad you asked that question, particularly through the cruise industry, the image of this sector was so badly bruised. What a beautiful way of turning it around as being the champion to actually allow people to understand right now, and right now being the important part. A lot of the health industry, the hotel industry brought people in earlier. Now that we know where we're at and people have calmed from the panic to more getting used to the now normal of uncertainty, it's just great timing. So credit to all, quite honestly. And this is where we've always said, we either all win or we all lose. There's no competition here, which goes to my next video, which I thought was really quite smart. It's a video that was put out by Uber and taking a really sexy, fun spin on the whole principle of wearing a mask. Because clearly, if you're taking an Uber, you're not going to take a spin in an Uber unless the mask is on. Please. What a great, fun, and funky way of getting the message across. And as clear, because clearly my video was too large in size, at the end of the day, we're all going to be at the risk of technology. And if it doesn't work, we move on. We move on, sir.
Yeah, great video. So it would be time for us, normally we'd have a second poll right now, but we're skipping that today as we want to spend a little bit more time with our guests. So if we could bring those 5 lovely young people onto the screen, that would be great. We appreciate that, Grace and Jessica.
Brilliant. So as we said, we have a very special episode today because right back at the beginning, Demian and I both said we wanted to have a conversation with travel, tourism, and hospitality students, graduates, job seekers, professionals, anyone out there who's trying to figure out what in the world is going on. This was really, really important because we are changing on a daily basis. So we thought, how do we encourage people to make the most of these 100 days, 150, 200, whatever they are, of lockdown? So today we brought to the stage 5 real-life COVID-19 stories. So no video this week. We're blending them all together into a really good mix of all of these types of viewers that we thought would be fabulous to have on stage, because ultimately Rise is for all the viewers, with all the viewers, and today it's about the viewers live. But instead of a 30-second challenge, instead of me doing the intros, all of them have been given a 10-second challenge. So please, can you introduce who you are, what is your status, and where in the world are you? Maria, up you go.
My name is Maria. I am a hospitality guest experience professional, and I live in London.
Stunning. Excellent. Gloria.
My name is Gloria Kisilu. I sell sustainable food products and I live in Nairobi, Kenya.
Fabulous. Shrey, you're up.
Hi, my name is Shrey. I'm from India. I'm currently a second-year student in EHL, an entrepreneur, poet, as well as an aspiring hotelier.
And you're going to be Professor Hodari's clothing coach going forward as well. Flavia.
My name is Flavia. I am currently calling you from Elba, but I live and work in Basel, responsible as a guest relation at the Grand Hotel Les Trois Rois in Basel, and half Argentinian as well as half Swiss.
Stunning. And our finale, Gianluca.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Gianluca. I'm a recent graduate from l'École de Lausanne in Switzerland, and I'm currently based in Italy.
Excellent. Welcome, 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 welcome times 5. Professor Hodari, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I want to give everybody a little bit more sense of who the 5 of them are. So I'm going to ask you to give me one word that really captures who you are, especially during these past 100 days. And I'm going to go in more or less reverse order. Gianluca.
All right, I'll start first. I would say that the word that best describes my status right now is realistic. Really? And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's a bit in between your segment, concern and confidence segment of the show. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you are, for example, a recent graduate who is looking for a full-time job or a student who is looking for an internship, you have to be flexible and adaptable in order to, for example, broaden the spectrum of jobs you're applying for. Or if you are an entrepreneur like Gloria, for example, you have to adapt to the current market, to the current situation if you want your business to survive, or if you want to look for a job, or if you want to change job. So I guess realistic is the word that best describes my status right now.
Okay, thanks very much. Flavia, one word.
Very tough one. Actually, fortunate would be my word, because I've decided to continue my path in the hospitality sector in a studying way. So I'll continue my studies in September. So I've been very lucky, and yeah, that would have been my word.
Great, Gloria.
Productive. I've been focusing on what really matters and just getting rid of the noise around.
Wonderful. And Maria.
I would say actually confused, because obviously there's so much going on, don't know what's coming next, and yeah, pretty much big question mark.
Okay, good word. And Shrey?
I would personally say determined, because throughout this time, it is in many ways a godsend opportunity, let's call it, to improve as much as possible and refine your skill set. So that's been my target thus far.
Right. Very, very interesting, diverse views and encouraging in lots of ways. Even being confused is encouraging because we're admitting that we're confused. And I would put myself in that boat as well, Maria. Anita, got a question for somebody?
I do. I'm actually going to cheat and use questions because we've had some of our former executives and residents send us questions for you. So our dear friend Jeff Poole from the WTTC, when he was on with our aviation segment with Haldane, he has asked a question. To each of you, what do you believe to be the most profound impact of COVID-19 on our industry?
All right, let's start with Shrey.
I would say COVID-19 has permitted people to really think of innovation in a different way. It's led to this potential paradigm shift in how you can progress in a more sustainable way, as well as being more mindful of perhaps looking at a more holistic spectrum, perhaps communicating that sense of cultural knowledge a little bit more to make sure that the world is more informed and homogenous.
Okay. Should we continue with that question? Gloria, what do you think has been the biggest impact?
I think we've had the opportunity to redesign, come up with new solutions in the system that we already had so that we can adapt to the COVID-19 situation.
Okay. And Maria?
Similar, to be honest, I will just echo that changing the ways of working and changing the status quo, that this is how we've always done it. There are different ways, and this is the perfect opportunity to do it.
It'll be interesting to look back one day and see, did firms take advantage of that? And that's something Anita might.
Absolutely.
Gianluca?
I would follow a bit like Gloria and Maria, like everyone answered, and I would add that coming from the hotel industry specifically, the fact that we have to social distance right now and we have to be careful with a lot of restrictions is, in my opinion, is killing a bit the magic of creating an experience for guests. But at the same time, as Gloria and Shrey and Maria just said, it's also an opportunity to reinvent this experience in order to don't lose this kind of touch with our guests.
Okay, and Flavia?
Hard being the last one in this question, but I wanted to disagree with Gianluca, but then he just changed his opinion or said that we can reinvent. So I'm glad he said that, because I feel like it has given us a lot of opportunities and a lot of more time, the most precious gift, in focusing on what do our guests really want and what do they need right now. But I would also say a profound impact was like in Switzerland, or in our case, in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, is that a lot of people lost their jobs. And I feel like that has also opened up the eyes of many people, also maybe being more appreciative of their situation and how they can evolve within that situation and keep the motivation and not give up. So I feel like that has been an important factor, that also a lot of employees were part of the whole team. So it wasn't only the management taking decisions. You would always, group up in those constellations, but now you would also have all your employees give their feedback. And I feel like that was a great decision for the future on a long-term scale.
Thanks. I'm going to change course a little bit here. And I want to ask Shrey and Flavia real quick answers, but Shrey, you're in school and you're going to continue. Flavia, you decided to come back and go back to school now. And I'm just wondering, did at any time you think the opposite? Did you say, Shrey, or, I should change careers, I should change industries? Or Flavia, did you at one point say something similar? I'm just trying to understand what kept you motivated to stay within the industry. So let's start with Flavia. Quick answer to that question, please.
Well, to be honest with you, I had my doubts at certain moments where I wasn't sure if I should maybe stay with my current position and, look at it in a future point. But I feel like now actually is the most important time, because now you will have also professors teaching us new aspects of the hotel industry, and also us with our stories and our past, or our 100 days, we can change the whole topic. So I felt like now is actually the most interesting time to start studying, and also financially, it also, to be honest, it's another situation also concerning that fact.
Yeah. Okay, Shrey, what kept you going?
I would personally say this whole COVID scenario actually strengthened my resolve for the industry, simply because you are being given an opportunity to be at the forefront of the industry, to lead that innovative wave, and you have the potential to have a larger impact in this transformative time, be it painful, be it rather annoying. It is an opportunity to innovate and pioneer a wave of progress.
Okay.
I have to say, Demian, I'm loving this crowd because you are so outnumbered as a grouch.
It's great to see people that are optimistic and positive, and I'm never trying to discourage you from that. I just want people to be realistic and realize you're entering the industry that's been hardest hit and probably the longest one to recover. And so if we're realistic about it, we can make good decisions like Gloria being more entrepreneurial during this time. Gloria, could you maybe tell us, as an entrepreneur, how did you have to shift and pivot a little bit your business, how you're spending your time due to being locked down and et cetera? How did you adapt as an entrepreneur?
For the first 2 weeks, it really hit me hard. I was doing nothing. I was so confused. Then after that, I decided, okay, I really need to rethink, restructure on the business plan, what needs to go next, just getting my priorities straight. So that's what I did. And I had to redesign. So I got new partners to partner up during the next season, the next phase in life, and during the next step for the business. So that's what I've been doing, sending emails, proposals, talking to new partners, investors, and things like that. Yeah.
Great.
Interesting. Demi, can I ask Dileep's question? Because similarly, from episode 5 on resorts, Dileep from Sri Lanka has sent through a question. This is a tricky one, so I'm going to ask for only one person to answer this. But the question was, what repurposing strategies can be adopted by the hospitality sector, especially resorts? Is there a repurposing opportunity there? Who's the brave soul who can answer that?
Not me.
Flavia, I'm curious on your point of view.
Well, it's a very tough question. I was hoping you would not choose me. But especially because resorts is the one that I've been least focused on, also with all the webinars I've been visiting. But that's a really tough one. I don't know if I can answer it like well enough that I will not regret my answer. But a repurposing strategy for the resort sector. Well, I feel like, the lucky part or aspect of resorts is that you would already have the physical distancing being enabled. So I feel like what the focus will be in the future is to really focus on what do our guests want? What do they need? So probably a lot have been in lockdown, or no, not probably, we know that they've been in lockdown. So they're seeking for relaxation, tranquility, wellness. And if they go to resort, it's mostly what they're looking for there. So I feel like the new strategy that you could do is that you would have, like, from a guest relation aspect, you already contact the guests beforehand. You try to figure out what do they want, what do they need, and then with all that information, you try to have like a personal, individual vacation in your resort. Because I feel like, when I think of the Maldives, for example, it's beautiful, but you more or less have this package that you receive. But why not make it a Anita Mendiratta package, or why not make it a Gloria package, and then get that little difference that you would probably miss out. So that's probably what I would do.
But like you're saying, is leverage the pre-communication to optimize the opportunity itself. Great answer. Demian, over to you.
Something a little different for Gianluca, and again, a short answer, but to a tough question. You graduated, had a position you were going to go into, that got withdrawn as the pandemic hit and companies start to lay off and furlough people. How have you been staying active in trying to find that next job, which obviously is in the most difficult time probably in the last 50 years to do so, but I know you haven't given up. So give me 3 things that you're doing that you would recommend people do to be able to at least stay positive and stay active in trying to find a job.
All right. The first one I would say is connected to the first poll you launched during the program, which is build your professional network. So I've been using this time especially here in Italy, where we were completely locked down in our houses from March to the end of May, basically. So I try to increment my professional network by using LinkedIn, by emailing old connection, trying to make new connection also with a web show like Rise, for example. So this one definitely is the first point. The second one is I try to look into, given the time that I had, I tried to look into industries which I never thought of working before, where hospitality students can be can use their talent in a way, because we are quite flexible and adaptable to many industries. Of course, I mean, it's not my case, but if you wanted to work, especially in hotel operations, for example, this is definitely not the best time to look for an hotel operation job, but that's also another stimulus, if you want to look in other industries, for example.
Thank you. All right. Got a question for Maria, Anita, or should we jump to our audience?
I think we jump to the audience.
Okay. Let's see what we got out there. Sarah, questions for our audience, for our panel?
Yes. I have one from Jennifer here. Has your 5-year plan changed since the COVID-19 outbreak?
Maria, I'd love for you to take that one.
I don't have a 5-year plan. I never been able to plan my life so far ahead, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I usually go like step by step. So what's my next thing? And once I kind of am in that thing, what's the next thing? So at the beginning of this year, actually, I was thinking of what's my next career step? What do I want to do? Do I want to change my job at the time? And currently also looking for work like Gianluca. So it's just an opportunity for me to take the time to really find that thing, network again. I've met people online. I've never ever met people online before in that way. I've never connected with so many sort of strangers that are no longer strangers. And I've only really just taking time for myself, like relaxing, sleeping in, those sort of things that you can't really do if you go to work 5 days a week, and working on sort of hobbies and things like that. So frankly, my next 5-year plan is, I don't know.
Let's develop a 5-year plan.
But that flexibility and adaptability that we were talking about before, we can see that coming through in a bunch of the answers. Gary, we got another question?
Yes, Gary wants to know, how can you take what you've learned from the time of COVID-19 and apply it to the hospitality industry as it looks now?
Okay, Gianluca, you want to take a stab at that one?
What can I say? I learned one thing which I wanted to add upon the question that you asked before to Maria, is the fact that, yes, sometimes I was kind of, at the beginning I was like, okay, I have to stay in my flat and everything, I'm bored, I need to meet people, I need to go out, but I actually understood that the time that we were given mandatorily by this situation is actually something that I never personally experienced. So I took this time really to look inside myself, look inside what I really want to do, changing few things, I had a plan, and then like Maria, I didn't have a plan anymore. So I was like, okay, how can I learned one thing, which I learned how to listen more to people, especially not being together, physically together, but in this case, like meeting people online. This is something that I could, if I really wanted to work strictly in the hospitality industry, going back to the hotel industry, for example, is definitely something which I could definitely apply in the future.
Interesting. I have a question for each of you. I'm going to give you another 10-second challenge. One thing we've always spoken about this 100-day period is that people aren't used to being with themselves. And it's been hard. It's been hard on everyone in different ways. But for each of you, in 10 seconds, starting with you, Maria, why are you grateful for these 100 days?
I just got the time to reflect, be by myself. Don't live alone, but practically just relax and think about the next steps, to be honest, and the kind of peace and quiet that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Indeed. Shrey, why are you grateful?
These 100 days have definitely allowed me to restart a lot of my pet projects. But most of all, I believe that it's allowed me to expand my horizons just that slight bit more, because work is a very essential part of my life. And these pet projects have allowed me to expand those boundaries of creativity and progressing and personal development.
Brilliant. Gloria?
It's allowed me to be very creative and also impact someone else's life, even if I can't see them.
Indeed. Flavia?
Well, I'm mainly grateful for the aspect of time. It gave me so much time to reflect on myself, on my future, on applying, on watching webinars like Rise. It has given me so many opportunities just with the aspect of time. So I think we should all be appreciative of this, because I don't know if we will ever experience it again. And I hope we will not experience it in this.
Indeed. And Gianluca?
But I would say two things. As you said, Anita, before, the first one is I was confident before with myself, but I got to know myself even better during this lockdown. So this is the first thing I'm grateful for. And the second one, which might sound a bit simple or obvious, but I got time to spend with my beloved ones, with my family, which I wouldn't, otherwise I didn't have, because I would not even be here in Italy. So these two things for me, I'm very grateful for.
Indeed. And Professor Hodari, 10 seconds. Why are you grateful for this time?
I've been really grateful because it's brought me out of probably a darker place that I would have been in had I not had all this time with you and our team. As we always said, the news is bad, but at least we're informed and we can talk about it and bring it to the foreground. So that's been good for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Excellent.
I want to see if we can get one or two more questions from the audience, because I know there's some questions out there. Sarah?
Yes. Clotilde asks, this is specifically for Gianluca. I'm curious, what other industries are you looking at where, with a hospitality background, do you think we have a shot?
Personally, I'm going to choose just one, as we don't have a lot of time, is the travel and tech industry. So I came from the hospitality industry. I joined EHL when I was 26. I always worked in hotels. Then, thanks to EHL, I got to do an internship in a tech company in Amsterdam. And I think that an exciting industry which is out there and is growing a lot right now, not right now, but in the past, but also in the near future, is a travel and tech industry. So working for tech companies that provide new softwares for hotel, for example, would be a career path that I would choose right now, because I think it's very exciting.
Good, and thank you. And Sarah, I think we have a question that's come in from Jonathan Worsley. Could you, who was our guest on our third episode? Can we get that question, please?
Yes. Jonathan asks, how will you use technology to assist you with being efficient and effective leaders?
I'm going to ask Gloria to see if she can jump in. How are you able to use technology in your business now to help you lead that increased productivity for the farmers?
Yes, we have been able. So since our farmers are off-grid, we've been able to create a platform for them whereby they can connect with us online through our system, and also having a two-way system whereby they're online and offline. So we've been able to use technology in that aspect.
Very good.
I must say as well, Demian, I love that you sent that over to Gloria, because Kenya has always been leading on the continent for digital usage of technology and mobile money, not just in Africa, but across the world. So great redirect on that. Excellent. Last question to our fabulous participants.
Sarah?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. My questions disappeared. My apologies. So Dimitri asks, having current pandemic wiping out marketing budgets and making budgeting and forecasting impossible for the coming future or the near future, how do you think the approach to budgeting will change? Does anyone have an insight on that?
I could give it a go. I would say from my experience, because I worked at the corporate side of hospitality, where budgets are set in a very different way than they are in operational hospitality. It would be it was very much ad hoc, and I would say it would be very much, do we need to do this? And does it bring us value? Does it bring value to the people we're trying to communicate to? And not the usual, we should do this, we must have a marketing tactical campaign, we must have an offer, rather than really purposeful-led marketing, rather than just always on kind of marketing.
It's a great point. I would say that now's the time to communicate, not campaign.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for questions. So I'm going to jump in and just thank everybody. Really, you guys have been true sports between being interviewed and then coming on to discuss whether or not you could come on the show, doing all the tech check with us, working on the lighting, everything to help us make the show as good as possible. And you've been dedicated viewers sending in question after question. I'm looking at you, Shrey. That's helped us make the show interesting and more relevant to people. So we hope that you've enjoyed this experience, and maybe 6 months from now, we might ask you to come back on, or at least write us a note, let us know how things are progressing for each of you.
Indeed. So sincere thank you. And Rise is always here with you because it's about you. So good luck. Stay safe, stay home, keep your hands clean, and we'll see you next week again.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care.
Wow. So 10 weeks in discussions about this episode, and what was it going to be like to bring on 5 viewers rather than 1 or 2 executives? How do you think that went?
I think it was brilliant. And I think if ever you want to take a holiday and I can get a subset sit-in as my co-host, I have 5 really good options. But it was lovely. And it was lovely from the point of view of, as we've always said, everyone has their own COVID-19 story. And it's so enriching for us to get that sense of where are people at. So I loved it. And I love the fact that they brought themselves to the stage, not just what they are as a status. So
No,
thank you to all of them.
I think being honest and sharing true concerns, or even saying I don't really have an answer to that question. I mean, it's what it's all about, I think. So,
absolutely. Stunning. So we actually thought, how do we pull this together? What are you now feeling concerned about, sir?
Probably a little less concerned after hearing all those optimistic views. I didn't really plan anything for this. One, I'm concerned what my daughter thought about this program and me on the screen, which I will hear about in a few minutes when we're done. My other concern is really, I think it's about, going back to school, and not just me teaching EHL, but in general, it's a little bit what we were getting at before. So much depends, mental health and education, on interaction with teachers. We know that in-person teaching is far superior from online in most cases and for most subjects. And the life at school and interaction with people and getting to know professors and your fellow students is so critical. And it's not just the US, even though we focused on that before. There's a lot of discussion in Europe. We know many schools aren't planning on bringing students back. They don't even want them living there. It's going to be all online. So I'm not just concerned about what's going to happen in the fall, but also a year later, how will all this change education? And I've got kids going off to college in a few years, and I'm concerned about the future of education and what the relationship between faculty and students in universities will be like.
Indeed. It's a very valid concern, because we're mammals, we're huggable people, and we like that contact. But what gives me confidence is that whatever happens, this time of shock and lockdown has brought people closer together and more free in giving feedback. So if anything, I would anticipate that your students and your colleagues would be much more free-flowing in how to make this work going forward, because we're all in it. So it's the water is still choppy, but as long as we all stay in the same boat, we're okay with that. So.
I hope the boat's big enough.
Indeed, indeed. Lovely. So we move forward.
Yes.
And as always, we ask you all to please share, if you're wishing, your COVID-19 story. Send it to us at an email in terms of riseweekly2020.com at gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do in terms of putting you on our Instagram page. But before we close, Professor Hodari, the finale.
So I think we've got a final episode next week, the 20th of July, for season 1 of Rise. And Rise will be back at the end of August and early September for season 2. And we've got some interesting things planned for that. We've got 2 exciting things on next week's episode that I want to make sure everybody knows about. First is the title, Come In, We're Reopen. And our idea was bringing on 2 general managers and area general managers who oversee not only a single property that they're the GM of, but also other properties that they help to direct in their operations. And we really want to talk about what has it been like to have a hotel that was closed, to go through a reopening, and possibly be thinking about having to shut down again in the future should that occur. So really want to leave everybody with end of season 1 with this idea of we're opening the hotels, we're opening the restaurants, we're opening borders. What does this mean? What is it really like on the front line of that? And the second exciting thing we've got next week is a new segment called Guess What Color Anita Will Be Wearing. So if you've got an idea what color Anita might wear, please send that in. You can do that in any of these vehicles here. The Gmail, the Twitter, the Instagram. Send me a letter at demian.hodari@email.ch. Call me anything you want. I'm curious if anybody can guess that color. And I'll give you one hint. She promised she won't wear, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
On that note, Grouch, thank you very much. And it is exciting because we're seeing the world cautiously reopen. And it'll be great to understand before we close down between seasons 1 and 2, what's it like out there? So great show as our finale. As always, as we close today, please, if you missed any episodes, rise-weekly.com. All of our episodes are there. You can have a good laugh at what's happening in Professor Hodari's world and why he is now officially the Grouch of Rise. And as ever, and warm thanks to our lovely Wizards of Oz, Jessica, Grace, Sarah, and Katya behind the scenes. Thank you for making this all happen. Our Lucky 13 show to everyone. We're going to be staying on for a little bit of questions for those that are left over in the inbox. Keep hanging on, but if you need to carry on with the rest of your day, as always, stay safe, stay strong, stay hopeful, keep your hands clean, and we will see you next Monday. Thank you for joining us on Rise.
Thank you. Bye, Nicole. Oh, you're still wearing the same outfit. I thought you might have changed for the host show.
Admittedly, I'm looking for something yellow. It just ain't gonna happen.
We may have to send you something by Federal Express before next week.
Stunning.
Sarah, I know that there's some questions out there. Let's get some of them.
Yes. Rohit asks, when are you planning your next holiday or business trip based on your perception of safety in travel and accommodation?
I can share. So there was a lot of discussion in my family and with some friends about whether we were going to stay in Switzerland in the summer or go abroad. And we're doing both. I'm doing a camping trip in Switzerland with a couple of friends and their sons and my son, thinking safe in Switzerland, campground, can easily get home, a lot of space and nature. So that was one trip. And the other trip is going to a neighboring country to a rental of a house of somebody that we know, and we know that it'll be empty before, et cetera. So we're a little cautious on that front. And we can travel across borders, and so families need a little bit of escape from Switzerland, a little bit of beach. So that's what we're doing. Business travel, nothing authorized yet. I'm supposed to speak at some conferences. One that's going to be a live conference, not authorized to go yet, and a couple that are moving online. So really no business travel yet. Anita?
Interesting. Well, in my next life, I want to come back as a professor, so I'm not taking any holidays. So my schedule does not allow for that, but that's fine. But I do have a trip planned in September to Georgia in Europe for the Executive Council of the UNWTO. So that will be an official business trip that is planned for the 3rd week in September. And interestingly, I just received a potential invitation to do a keynote address at a conference in March next year in Australia. And it was interesting having a conversation with the lovely woman who invited me this morning around, is the country going to be open? So the virtual versus live, the intention is live, but people just have no idea. It's amazing how far people are pushing out the starting line. Yeah. So a great question. Thank you for asking that.
I'm just going to add one more thing to that answer. What I wish I could do would be go to visit my parents and siblings in the US. Especially take my kids and my wife so we could have a little bit of family time with them there. And that's just not possible now, but that would be my first choice. And as soon as that's possible and safe, I will do that. Another question, Sarah?
Yes. Dimitri asks, what do you think will be the operational and economic repercussions for the cruise ship industry?
Oh dear.
We've talked about them a couple times and basically said it doesn't look good, right? And everything, they were supposed to start sailing again in July and August, or they had said they would, some of the big companies out of the US, and then the government said, no, you can't. And so things are just going to be long-term pause in the cruise industry, I think. And I mean, I wish I knew more. I just would say, I can't see any positive news on that front.
Indeed. Cruise is the same as aviation, where there's actually a lot of early retirement of the vessels because to your point, they're just too expensive to even have in docks and then bring back to life again. So there's a lot of, and it's fascinating when you see how both airlines and cruise ships are stripped down and the materials are recycled, whether it's lounge chairs or it's the metal and the wiring. So there is a lot of reallocation of the cruise ships into different areas that might see a reopening, because bearing in mind as well, the cruise industry is going into hurricane season in the Caribbean as well. So there's a lot of early retirement of vessels taking place because it just doesn't, it's not economically viable, not just to run them, but to bring them back to life again, having them been in ports for so long. Great question.
And I think it's important for people who might not know as much as you to recognize that prior to this virus, the cruise industry was phenomenal, right? Expanding, more and more people cruising, spending more money, more ships being built, bigger ships being built, with some concern that it might be too much, but you really went from one day to in an industry that was thriving to, utter collapse, probably faster and bigger drop even than the hotel sector, because hotels are still needed and still seen positively. So it's an amazing case study and something I think business people and government people will be talking about for years to come, because there are a lot of people who depend on cruises for their jobs, as we've talked about as well. So it's even if you're not a cruise person, keep track of that industry because there's a lot to be learned.
And I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because to your point, it was the fastest growing sector. But what I always find we forget is the value chain. For all of the cruise growth and all of the repositioning of ships, how many destinations invested massive amounts into cruise terminals? Right. So what happens to all that cruise terminal development as well? So it's the whole supply chain and how that integrates. But no one saw this one coming, and it's turning into a Titanic, sadly.
Sarah.
Yes, Sanjita asks, given the present fiscal landscape when luxury is more niche, how do you propose to attract guests to further support hospitality, employee retention, and viability?
You're saying employee viability in the luxury sector? Is that what we're trying to get at?
Yes.
Is that how you interpret it, Anita?
I interpret it as that when she said luxury is more niche, it's fewer people going for the luxury product. But this is something that you've spoken about several times, that on the economic side, the cheaper the 2, 3, 4-star properties versus the 5+ star properties, both ends of the spectrum are actually going to be mobilized. It's a question of how they do it sustainably, but it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
To be seen depending on how they adjust to the protocols.
Agreed. Sarah, another question?
Yes. Do you think it would, Alessandro asks, do you think it would be possible for some hotels to perform on a year-on-year comparison in occupancy and ADR in this scenario?
To outperform?
Yes.
I can't imagine anyone coming even close to what they had forecasted, budgeted. So no, I mean, I guess if last year your hotel was closed and this year you're open a little bit, you're going to outperform, or last year you had some horrendous situation. I can't imagine anything worse than this pandemic. So no, I haven't heard of anybody saying, hey, we're having a better year than before. No.
The only circumstance I can imagine that happening, and I think it's extremely unusual, is if government payment for subsidization of frontliners staying in the hotels, because then they wouldn't have the usual operating costs. It's just core accommodation. But I don't see that happening anywhere in the world.
Any more questions, Sarah?
Yes. Stephen asks, how much of a focus do you feel the current pandemic will have in the future or hospitality education curriculum? And do you feel that there's any area in particular that should be focused on?
So that's a great question. It's actually I just submitted a research article with some colleagues where we exactly addressed this, where we each said, how will this change what we think needs to be taught in our discipline? So in marketing, what would you focus on more rather than less, and what new things or new ideas or theories would you incorporate that you realize because of this virus need to be part of the curriculum? So going to your question, I absolutely think so. I don't think anybody can ever see the world again like we did before. And it's not just, everything's been affected across the world, not just our industry, but almost every industry, every country, every individual. So how could you not include this? I guess if you're, very operational and teaching how to make a cocktail, maybe that doesn't change. But how do you clean a room? That's changed. How do you market a room? How do you train employees? How do you serve guests in a restaurant? How do you look at finance and accounting? And how do you take budgeting? And how do you decide to reserve money for a rainy day? All of these things are going to be more important than ever. So I can't imagine not doing it. And in fact, it's kind of a maybe sensitive thing, but if you are in school and you realize nobody's changing anything after this, I'd be asking why are they not? Because the industry is changing, and as educators in hospitality, we're very much aligned with industry, not just vocationally, but also learning from them and research. So there should be a very close tie. So you should be expecting to see a lot of development. And one of our panelists said earlier that it'd be interesting. I think it was a lot of interesting to go back to school because teachers will be, teaching us how to deal with all this. Well, remember, we're all still learning about this as well. So I wouldn't expect revolutionary new answers yet, but yes, raising the questions, discussing them a little bit like we do on this show, and hopefully starting to explore answers going forward.
Indeed. It's the timing is interesting because I'm actually speaking tomorrow at a conference and at University of Johannesburg on this in higher education in Africa. So we'll send the link through for registration through our website and through the Twitter account. But it's exactly that. And to me, the opportunity of the curriculum is about the travel and tourism ecosystem. So there's exactly, as you say, Demian, the operational side, 1000%, that has to change because the protocols have changed. But as always happens with a crisis with our industry, suddenly people get an understanding of the supply chains that are supporting the travel and tourism sector, the role of mega events, the role of retail, the role of, again, the value chain supporting it. That has to change in the curriculum because only then will the travel, tourism, and hospitality sector be seen as an essential economic sector and not on the outside of education, healthcare, etc. Yeah. So that ultimately is how it needs to move forward. Otherwise, the 80% of SMEs that go through travel and tourism, that whole economic ecosystem will fail. And that's what the blessing of travel and tourism is. It's not about the travelers, it's about the supply chains.
I agree. And I gave a bunch of operational examples before, but I teach strategy at college, to teach innovation, finance. That's all we talk about is how our courses are changing. And strategy is really about how do we deal with changes in the world and how they impact our industry. And that's exactly what we've been talking about on Rise. And, how do you not address this real life, once in a lifetime, hopefully, event that's changing everything. So
I like the whole once in a lifetime, hopefully.
Sarah, another question?
Yes. Our last question, and it's from one of our panelists today, Maria, she asks, who are the winners and losers in hospitality? Students, graduates, professors, company, sectors?
Free.
I'm glad she didn't ask that when she was on. I think it's hard to find winners. I think eventually there could be winners, and that's those firms that are able to address this, be more innovative like we've talked about, find what customers and employees and owners of properties need going forward and can adapt to that quicker and better. They're going to win over their competitors. I'm not sure that they're going to end up winning versus who they are today. We're seeing forecasts in hotels, it's going to be at least 3 years before we see 2019 levels. And that's people making educated guesses. It could be 10 years, it could be quicker. We don't really know because we've never been through anything like this before. I don't think employees are winning in any way. Again, less jobs, more difficult job, probably less money out there to pay. So I don't see that. Customers, the whole travel experience is kind of a downer right now. Eventually, maybe we've talked about before, You know, if you think about government saying, well, here's the time to reboot our tourism, maybe make it less mass, more individual, better tourism, less damaging to the environment. Hopefully the environment will be the big winner. And hopefully that doesn't mean less jobs and livelihoods for people. That's my long answer.
I'm going to default to you being the grouch. You default to grouch. I'm going to default to my UN role and say the winners are going to be anyone who recognizes this time as an opportunity to reshape and restart the future more meaningfully and more purposefully and more responsibly. I didn't want to say sustainably because it's all the same. The losers are going to feel that the doors will open and we go back to the way things were. And that applies to every category, every headset. But the winners are those who don't waste these 100 days.
Nice. And with that, we'll thank everybody for having watched the episode and stayed on for the inbox. Please make sure you tune in next week for the season finale of season 1 of Rise, and to see what Anita is wearing color-wise.
And you gonna wear a tie?
I'll surprise you with what I'm wearing. Thank you, everybody.
Happy lucky week number 13. Take care, everyone.
Bye.